This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 10 is the time, and I have two screens rolling in front of me with rolling news stations, one of which is currently featuring an address from a senior member of the Israeli Defense Force, and the other of which features footage of a child being dug out of rubble in Gaza while other residents continue searching and digging for bodies in a building where they were sheltering. It's a child's body being dug out of the rubble, and it's a fairly bleak juxtaposition, isn't it? Let's try and use the word bleak a bit less often. I don't know why I said that actually, but it just occurred to me then as the words came out of my mouth again. So there are two screens literally in front of me displaying the two elements of the current chapter of this unfolding tragedy, this unfolding disaster. There are some provocative questions I could ask you today. What is this bombing going to achieve? Now we're seeing the numbers of Palestinian dead doubling roughly what the murdered Israelis last weekend. What is the plan? What is going to be achieved? But I don't think it's the day to ask that. Is there a hierarchy in place? I know that the BBC has received roughly 50-50 complaints. I bet it's 52-48. They've received roughly 50-50 complaints about bias, which I suspect that senior staff members at the BBC will take some comfort from. I'm not a great believer that if you get equal accusations of bias from both sides, it proves that you're being impartial. I think it's often more complicated than that. But in this particular case, following social media criticisms, I think probably you could break it down. Half of people heavily invested in this think that BBC is heavily biased in one direction, and half think it's heavily biased in the other direction. Here at LBC, we're a little bit different, I suppose. On most issues, we're allowed to pick a side. We sort of balance each other out in the course of the day, but I even find the language of picking a side unbearable in this context. And we spoke a lot last week about how upsetting even that is for some people. They see it as a sort of imposition of equivalence or a pursuit of balance where there is none. But I said to you yesterday, and I'll say it again to you today, I am not going to change my reaction to news of a dead child according to that child's origins, antecedents, geographical location, ethnicity, star sign, and here it is, or religion. So 2 calls yesterday struck me. No, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't know that they were the best calls to the programme, but they were the ones that sowed seeds that sprouted after the programme. And one was a caller suggesting that, as with the troubles in Ireland, this hasn't really got much to do with religion. Now, they may have had religion at its root, but it doesn't seem to play much of a part today. I don't know whether that's true or not. And the other was, I think it was Mark in Chichester, actually, who very, very early in his call described himself as, I'm Jewish but not religious. And I've said to him, so you heard me say this, if you were listening. If you weren't, I need a letter off your mum by the end of morning break, okay? I said to him that always jars me. It didn't necessarily used to, but in all the years I've been doing this job and all the lessons I've learned, that's one of the phrases that I respond to, I think, very differently from how I used to. Because you might say, I'm not a religious Jew. I'm not religious. I'm not very religious. I'm Jewish, but I'm not very religious. But it wouldn't have made any difference to the Nazis, would it? So in the context of persecution, division, Holocaust, you kind of can't leave religion out of it. Because it was religion, matrilineal religion, that essentially identified the targets of the Nazis. And yet, in this debate, imagine if you were a complete outsider trying to work out why the people living in the Gaza Strip and the people living in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv couldn't all be living in peace, could be living in 2 countries with normal borders. And you're trying to work out why they can't. What is the answer to that question? Historical grievance, injustice, imposition, colonialism, or biblical birthright? There's so many different answers. But how how important How important is religion? What role does religion play in the current situation? I'm not sure I can answer that question. I'm not sure I know. Because if it's nothing to do with religion, as one very well-informed caller said yesterday, if it's nothing to do with religion, then what is it to do with? 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. The question is pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure that when I first started very clumsily and often I think quite offensively discussing Middle Eastern issues and discussing Israel in particular, I had an abiding fascination with the notion of religious superiority, of a kind of chosen people ideology. And I used to think that was a really big part of the problem, that if you subscribe to a chosen by God, a God that other people don't necessarily believe in or believe in a slightly different version of, then you have problems that can never be overcome. There's a sort of intractability built in there that is, I mean, it's almost the definition, isn't it, of an unravelable knot. How does that ever end? And I don't think that's true. And yet we talk about Islamist terror. We know that the ideology, such as it is, of Hamas and even I think of Hezbollah, is, well, we use the word Islamist for a reason, don't we? And is it just a distinction between Muslim and Jew? And there will be a massive majority of Muslims, as ever, who abhor things done in the name of their religion by terrorists and by monsters. And similarly, there are plenty of people who practice peaceful religion and don't subscribe to the idea that by dint of being of one faith or another, they're inherently and naturally superior to another faith. So I don't even know today what role religion plays in these problems, in these unfolding issues. I mean, how important is it? It's not like me, is it? I've only got like 3-4 word question. I don't think I've got much else to pontificate on or contemplate. Why isn't it featuring more, actually, is the question, isn't it? More than how important is it? Why isn't religion featuring more in this conversation, given that the territorial decisions were defined by it, but we don't hear any reference to it in the context of the conversation that we're currently having. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. I don't want a rouse today. The first caller yesterday was quite punchy, and we took the first caller one show last week just went off on a completely mad tangent about me, so we cut that one off quite early. I mean it probably won't work, but I'll say it anyway. I don't think I want any rouse today. Everyone's got a limit. I've told you a few times, I'm not one of those presenters that can sort of turn off my emotions. I can't just treat it all like a game and treat a conversation about children dying on both sides of a man-made wall in the middle of the Middle East. I can't turn it into an opportunity to attack the BBC or just have a conversation as if it was Labour versus Tory or, I don't know, a Just Stop Oil protest. I can't. This gets to me. It kills me. It breaks me up inside. You know it does, because it does you as well. So there's a limit. There's a finite amount of tension that I can tolerate, and I some days I can wade into the fray and I'll take criticism and abuse from all comers, and other days I just don't really want to do it. And today I don't really want to do it. Today I want the lights to come on a bit more, and they may not, what they illuminate may not be pretty. We may not like what is illuminated today, but if you were to ask somebody a sort of fairly cursory question about what is going on, you would expect religion to be a large part of the answer. So why has it been such a tiny part of the conversation that we have been hearing and having for the last 10 days or so? That number once again, 0345 6060973 is the number you need. It's 13 minutes after 10. I think we will find time today to talk about other things as well. I'm intrigued, really intrigued. And it's lasted for 48 hours now, this intrigue. So you can tell that it's real by the news coming from our prisons. The latest, of course, is that violent prisoners could be freed to ease pressure on jails. That is one of the maddest headlines you're ever going to see in your life. Violent convicts may be freed this week to ease pressure on jails. Alex Chalk gave a speech yesterday which laid out some plans for the future which look a lot like some plans for the past that got kind of overridden or ignored. But the uselessness of short prison sentences really intrigues me. If you've ever served a short prison sentence, then today could be your day to break your phone in duck. But we'll start, as I think we must, with this question. Whenever I came to topics like this as a kid, as a wet behind the ears radio host, I always thought that they were conversations about religion. And they're not, or certainly this one doesn't seem to be, and hasn't been, and doesn't seem destined to be. So I think today we will try to work out why that might be. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:17, not for the first time in the last 10 days or so, I find myself looking at something that's appeared in front of me and thinking perhaps I've accidentally taken some magic mushrooms or something. It seems, I think, that an MP of Palestinian heritage, the first British Palestinian MP, in fact, Layla Moran, I think she's just been asked on breakfast television whether, given her family connections, she knew anything in advance about the Hamas attack on Israel. I wonder if you don't know already, I wonder if you can guess who the presenter was asking that question. That is certainly how it's been presented to me. I need perhaps to play the footage. Shall we discover together whether that is... I mean, that would be like asking me if I had any inside information on the Canary Wharf attack by the IRA when I was at college. It's absolutely breathtaking. But conversations about hierarchies and biases and balance do perhaps lead us to conclude that he's probably not going to get into any trouble at all for that. 18 after 10 is the time. Z is in Birmingham to tell us why religion is not being talked about at all this week and whether indeed it should be. Z, what would you like to say?
First of all, James, I just want to say thank you for being one of the only people on the media who's neutral on this whole
Thank you.
On this whole issue. I'll be honest with you, I've been watching you for over a long time, mate. I'm talking over a year. I listen to you all the time.
Thank you.
And I have so much respect for you, and I really genuinely, that comes from the heart. You say that Palestinian children and Israeli children are the same, because they are. They are the same. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
With regards to religion,
yes.
With regards to religion, I can only speak from an Islamic point of view because I'm a Muslim. And I can tell you the words of the Quran. You know, they say that if you were to kill one death, it is as if you've killed the whole of humanity. And that is God's words in our Quran. So therefore, from an Islamic point of view, from a religious point of view, from the Muslim side, from the Palestinian side, I cannot justify any killing of anybody. So for what happened last week on Saturday in Israel, Islam teaches us not to do those actions. So from a religious point of view, that's the answer from that side. I can't speak on the Israeli side, but I'm sure in Judaism it's the same thing, if not similar. Killing is wrong. You know what I mean?
You make a powerful point, and of course you do, and I understand it completely. But it's not the beginning and the end of the conversation that we're going to have today, because I mean, people may not even know that I think Hamas translates as Islamic resistance movement, doesn't it? So clearly, from their point of view, religion is quite a big part of. I think from their point of view, from you trying to understand it from their point of view, is if you look at what's been happening in the last 70 years, and obviously I'm only 30, so I can only speak of what I've been seeing, yes. You know, from a teenager. Do you know what I mean? All across social media. And prior to this atrocity that happened this week, prior to this, I have constantly seen Israeli IDF soldiers and Israeli settlers going into Gaza, going into the West Bank and humiliating people, attacking people, literally grabbing elderly, throwing them onto the floor, doing whatever they want. And there's even people that come from the UK that go to Jerusalem, you know, because it's part of the pilgrimage as well, to go and see these holy sites. And if they're not in a group, and sometimes even when they are in a group, they are also tormented by the IDF. Their passports get taken off them, they get interrogated, and the way that they're treated, it's just not acceptable. But you know what? They get away with it, James. They've gotten away with this for such a long time. And I think the Palestinian people have been so patient. And Hamas did ask for a 2
two-state solution in the past. I'm sure that was something that was brought to the table, but it just hasn't happened. And again, I am not justifying any killing.
I don't know that the last bit. I don't know that the last bit is true. And yeah, I mean, you are. I'm sure unintentionally. But when you talk about the patience of Palestinians, it sounds as if you're casting the terror attacks as being a consequence of patience running out. Well, I'm glad we've clarified that. But I think Hamas are an obstacle to Hamas in their current form are an obstacle to a two-state solution. But if it's not about hang on, because I want to get back to the focus of today's show. So if it's not about religion...
It's not about religion.
What is it about?
It's just unfortunately there's a very skewed narrative that the media is showing, and I think, to be honest with you, they're trying to make any justification as means necessary to destroy Gaza.
That's not the phone-in that we're having today.
But I'm just answering your question.
I hear you.
I don't think if religion was involved, I think this wouldn't be happening.
And yet, how do we distinguish between the people in Gaza and the people in Israel, if not at some point by religion?
I don't know how religious these
No. It's not a question of religiousness or religiosity. It's a question of religion. What is the distinguishing feature of these two Semitic peoples, if not religion? And yet I agree with you that it doesn't sound as if religion has anything to do, or certainly not your religion as you understand it, has nothing to do with what anybody has done. And yet for the people firing the bullets or dropping the bombs, I don't know if the same would be true. See, thank you. And thank you for your kind words at the beginning as well. David is in Kingston. David, what would you like to say?
I would say it's colonisation. This was a land that was promised from a British politician to a wealthy banker, German banker, before World War II happened, and they displaced 700,000 people. And these people in Gaza are the descendants of the people that the British government displaced. That's colonisation. They may have used religion as an excuse to colonise.
Well, it wasn't an excuse to colonise, was it? It was a homeland for the Jewish people, and your history is correct. Although we'll never know whether the 1948 settlement would have happened if the Holocaust hadn't. And I'd ask you a question Daniel Finkelstein asked in his Times column last week when some Jews were liberated from a concentration camp by a Russian Jewish soldier, and they said, "Where do we go now?"
Well, when was it a Jewish state? You're going back to Roman times.
No, the question is, where do we go now?
You're talking about the displacement of 700,000 people that had lived there for
No, I'm not. I'm just talking about the Jewish people being liberated from a concentration camp. And most of modern Israel was nothing like what it is now in 1948. The country as it exists now has been built from the ground up. But the question I'm asking you is, where would they go?
Well, and
I'm going to insist that you answer it, or we'll move on to another caller. Where would they go?
If you put them into someone else's house,
it's not an answer. Where would they go?
Well, not somewhere where they have.
No, not where won't they go, David? It's a simple question. Where would those people go?
If it's down to the British government,
it's down to you. It's down to you, mate.
In the UK, if it's down to the British government, they're going to displace.
Where would they go?
In the UK. Can you hear me? The UK.
Okay, so we'd have brought all the Jewish people in the world to the United Kingdom.
Rather than displace other people, if you're going to take that,
how would you do that without displacing other people?
Well, give it to some of the land.
Where are they going to live?
The royal, when King William I came over, again colonising this land, 1/3 of this country belongs to his friends and family.
I'm glad you reached for William the Conqueror, because I was worried that people wouldn't realise how ridiculous you sounded.
Well, you support what?
It's not about what I support. I just asked where those people would go, and you started talking about William the Conqueror, which unintentionally helps everybody understand why that's such a powerful and largely unanswerable question. 26 minutes after 10 is the time, and for you, of course, it is about religion, because two Semitic peoples living alongside is the unachievable dream. The difference, the distinction is that you don't believe the Jews had the right to be there, but you do believe that the Palestinians did. And that's a politically sustainable position, but it's a much uglier one than perhaps you realise in many ways. Leslie's in Boreham Wood. Leslie, what would you like to say?
I would just like to ask you, James, that if
hang
religion...
on. I know it's a bit unfair given that you haven't got a radio show, but you're here to answer the questions I'm asking.
Okay, fine. I'd just like to ask you if religion...
No, I'll say it again. I'm asking why no one's talking about religion. So your answer to that question is...
If religion is out of the picture,
that's the question.
Why, when I walk down the street, I shout, "I'm a religious Jew. I'm not Israeli. I'm a born and bred Brit. Why am I shouted at? Free Palestine."
Well, that's about religion.
Well, right.
That's about your religion. But the situation as it is unfolding in Palestine today, the bombing of Gaza, what does that have to do with religion?
Nothing.
Pardon?
Absolutely nothing. But
so when you get abused on the streets of London, that's all about religion. And when Muslims get bombed in their homes, that's got nothing to do with religion.
Well, to kill every Jew. So obviously it's to do with religion.
But we're talking about the bombings in Gaza today. How has that got nothing to do with religion?
Because there's Christians. I mean, as far as I'm concerned,
that's a religion.
There's whoever living... Okay. All right, you're clearly not interested in having a conversation.
I'm very interested in having a conversation, but I'm just interested in having answers to the questions that I'm asking. So, I, by the way, I feel terrible about what's happening to you, and I completely abhor the abuse that you're receiving. But when you say that the response from Israel to Gaza has absolutely nothing to do with religion, I don't see how you can knit the two together. One's got everything to do with religion, but the response has got nothing to do with religion.
I've got no idea. No, I've got no idea.
Nor have I.
I'm connected through my religion.
Nor have I.
I've got no idea.
No, and that's what's confusing, isn't it? So, what role is religion playing in today's event? It's not a great phone line, actually, Leslie.
Clearly, me walking down the street, the people who are shouting at me, they believe it's religion related. The Israelis who are trying to defend their citizens,
and that's a conflation a conflation of Israeli with Jew.
Correct.
Yes,
but that's not conflation of.
And
with Muslim.
It's very frustrating because I can't continue the conversation with the phone line only giving me about one word in three. But then we come to the next question, which is why are those people in Gaza being bombed today? And the answer would have to be because of what Hamas did in the name of religion, in the name of their religion, or what they believe to be their religion. Leslie, it was an unsatisfactory conversation because of the quality of the phone line, so I apologise for that. It's coming up to 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
33 minutes after 10 is the time. On reflection, as some of you did point out at the outset, including my friend Scott, that suggesting I'm not really in the mood for a fight, so we're going to talk about religion. May not have been one of my wisest contributions to public discourse. Well, let's just call it optimistic, shall we? And David's Jewishness being conflated with support for, I don't know, let's just say Israeli foreign policy or Israeli domestic policy. It seems to me to be the opposite, or the corollary was the word I was looking for, of what happened to Layla Moran on the television this morning, because this is absolutely extraordinary. Layla Moran is a British Palestinian woman who became the first British Palestinian member of Parliament. And Richard Madeley was presenting a breakfast television programme this morning, and I can't believe my ears.
They have more and more people coming to the church because you seek sanctuary in a church. That's what you do. And, to the why don't they just move? Because I'm thinking to myself, why, when you know that something's coming, why don't you move? Mm. And then to hear, well, actually, they have nowhere to go to. And remember, there's no way to communicate with other people in Southern Gaza. So what are you meant to do? You haven't got a car. There's no phone batteries. So you can't get in a car. They're too frail anyway, one of them. And they're there as a family unit. So I'm hearing what's happening from them through one of the sisters who is the cousin of my mother. So my immediate family is in the West Bank. They're in Jerusalem, Ramallah and Jericho. Thank goodness so far. They are very scared about what comes next, and they're fine. But this pocket of the extended family, we are desperately worried about. It needs to stop.
Your family connections in Gaza. Did you have any indication of what was going to happen 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago? Was there any word on the street in Gaza?
I suppose you could make a case for him just being a bit thick and thinking that, terror attacks are launched after a bit of banter with the lads and a bit of chatter down at the town square. What are you doing tomorrow? Oh, I'm going to launch a terror attack on it. But good God, the mind boggles, actually. The mind boggles. And it, for me, continues to boggle at the precise role that religion plays in the combat in the Middle East at the moment. So for Hamas, their rationale has to be religious. They exist to, it's called the Islamic Resistance Movement, is how it translates, and yet the question of why are Palestinian people being bombed in Gaza today, is that because of their religion? John's in Newham. John, what would you like to say?
Really? Yes, hello.
Hello.
I'm delighted that you're introducing religion into it, because it's a very key part of the equation.
Is it?
And is overlooked.
Yes.
Yes, and the reason I'm saying that is in biblical times, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, the people created with the Jews, and the Hebrews, and known as Jews, they were given the first prophecy. So they're not special people, but God chose them as to be an example to the world. And,
but obviously, the huge majority of people in the world would completely reject that.
Well, it's in the Bible, put it that way.
I know, and obviously, the huge majority of people in the world would completely reject that.
You're right, but for those who do believe,
but yes, you're describing the psyche of the believers, as it were.
The believers,
yes.
and as a believer, I'm of Jewish descent on my mother's side, Christian on my father's side, and I love both, but I follow Judaism because I prefer it. But I believe that these prophecies cannot be overridden by man, and because it says that the Jews will be spread around the world, and they would return to the land of their forefathers eventually.
Yes. And
this has happened, so you can't stop God's prophecies coming to fruition. All you can do is manage the situation within it.
Yeah.
So I personally would like a two-state solution, because it does actually say in the Bible that it says Zion will be redeemed through justice, and those who return to her through justice. But a calamity awaits the rebels and the sinners, and the God-forsaken, they'll perish. So every Jew who calls himself a Zionist, who believes that they should be able to return, have got to make sure they're doing it with justice, in which case they'll be okay, rather than those who are doing it wrongly, without justice, who will perish. So, so you don't think there's any biblical obstacle to a two-state solution, then? No. All it says is that Zion will be redeemed through justice. Now, maybe a two-state solution will be a temporary measure until the Messiah comes, and then he'll know what to do. But until then, I can only see the two-state solution being the only way, and unless someone come up with a better plan.
So, the problem here has been actually depicted perfectly by two calls. You and the chap in Kingston. I think it was. I've had two Davids today. I can't keep track of all the names, but the chap in Kingston who was talking about colonialism, because you are describing a divine right, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely.
And that in many ways, if the other people also think they've got a divine right to do what they're doing, then never the twain shall meet.
Indeed, yes.
And it becomes really for the outsider listening in, it becomes a fairly surreal conversation about whose divine is righter.
Well, it depends. I think there are millions and millions of Christians in the world who believe the Bible.
Well, they believe the New Testament. They believe the New Testament.
Yes, but the New Testament, and because
and
Jesus
to be fair,
said,
most of us don't believe all of it, otherwise we'd be trying to get through the eye of a needle, wouldn't we?
I agree. But in Matthew chapter 5, verse 18, Jesus in his own words said, think not that I've come to change the law or the prophets. So in other words, all the prophets from the Old Testament, and there are several of them, Moses, Amos, Isaiah, who all predicted that the Jews would be spread around the world but would return. Any believing Christian should say, okay,
I mean, crikey, you've certainly brought religion smack bang into the middle of the conversation, haven't you, John?
Yes.
I don't know whether I should thank you or cut you off immediately, frankly.
Yes.
But it is, there it is. And okay, then I'm going to ask you the question that I don't think anyone can answer.
Yeah.
What role does religion play in the current bombing of Gaza?
Okay, I'll answer that because the Quran, very specifically, it includes the prophecy about the Jews returning. So Hamas, in their charter, it says they're governed by the Quran, but the Quran includes the prophecy that was given to Moses about the Jews, the children of Israel, they call it, returning. So Hamas are going against their own Quran.
Well, it's an Abrahamic religion, though, isn't it? So wouldn't they argue that your definition of the children of Israel is not the same as theirs?
Well, they shouldn't do, because it's quite clear in the Old Testament who the children of Israel are. It's the descendants of Jacob, and they're generally known as the Jews because there's a lot of lost tribes. But there's that they know who the Jews are when they're targeting them to kill them.
I'm going to push you to a more coherent answer in the context of whether or not, what role is religion playing in the Israeli decision to drop these bombs?
Yes, I was referring to the Hamas attacking. Yeah. Oh well, in a way, every country's got a right to defend itself. It's enshrined in international law.
That's not religion, though, is it? Or is it? Because then you move into the conflation of Israeli with Jewish, which, of course, is a huge part of the problem with anti-Semitism.
Yeah, so the way I'd sort of try and crystallise it then is every country's got the right to defend itself, but a country mustn't go too far. There are limits. And I would say that Israel is overstepping the limits in its bombing. I know they say that they send text messages to everyone in the building before they put a bomb on it, but there's so many, nearly 2,000 people have died in that bombing. And so I would say because they've been prioritising building settlements instead of making peace, they've got to accept that the other side is going to sort of be massively against that. And so they've reaped the consequences of not doing enough to try and make peace because they're prioritising building more settlements. And
this is oddly missing from a lot of British coverage, actually. There was one very good piece in the Times today where they quote at length an Israeli, a Times of Israel columnist who we quoted yesterday, describing the jeopardy in which Netanyahu finds himself and the blame being directed at him for much of what has happened and is happening in the context both of diplomatic failure and intelligence failure. John, thank you. Crikey, it was a very helpful contribution, but it takes us up to the brick wall that runs through all of these sort of conversations, which is two people who believe completely different things, think that they've both got a divine right to do what they want. Although John offered up a little bit of biblical cherry picking, but he did offer up a textual basis for his position. 10:44 is the time. Let's go to Rahaf in Reading. Rahaf, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thank you very much for taking my call. I'm sorry, welcome. I'm a little bit nervous, so bear with me.
It's only me, and it's such a straightforward, simple, uncontroversial topic, Rahaf. What could possibly go wrong?
I know. So anyway, I'll keep it simple. I don't think it's about religion. I believe it's about power, land, authority, colonialism, as a previous caller has said. And my reason for that is that I see lots of Jewish people against Israel, and we have to distinguish between Judaism or Jews and Zionists or the Zionism.
You see Jewish people against some of the actions of the Israeli state. You don't see many opposed to the existence of the Israeli state, do you? Or do you?
Sorry, I don't understand your question, James.
So I see lots of Jews who are opposed perhaps to Likud in particular, to Netanyahu, to certain policies, to settlements, to occupation. But I don't see many Jews, I don't personally come across many Jews who reject the idea that the state of Israel should exist where it currently exists?
It might not be many, but I think if you attend any of the marches for peace or for freedom for Palestine, etc., you do see them saying that. I've seen lots of posts on social media with Jewish people condemning what's happening and actually saying this is completely against our religion.
That's not what I said.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You move on to tell me why you rang in.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, that's the main reason that that I felt that it's not about religion, because actually before the establishment of Israel, different religions lived peacefully side by side, and it was only when whatever the world or whoever it was decided that there needs to be an exclusive homeland for only Jews, that it starts to create problems because you don't allow don't allow everybody to have the equal rights. So unfortunately, then it becomes a bit conflated that it's about religion and people are anti-Semitic if they're anti, the Zionist ideology. But by nature, the Zionist ideology is inherently prejudiced or gives exclusive rights to one people over another. I don't mind, what we want to call it, but at the end of the, that can be likened to apartheid or oppression, occupation, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, that's what it's about. So it's not about Jews versus Muslims or anything like that. It's about a colonizer who has, oppressed a certain people for so many years.
Some quite provocative language there, but that goes with the territory. Why is Hamas called the Islamic resistance movement then?
Well, it might be by a group of Muslims, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all Muslims agree with their ideology or their tactics. But ultimately,
so you found the common ground, really, the Jews and the Muslims who don't agree with what their quote side end quotes are doing. I wonder if we'd be in a better place if we put them in charge.
But well, I mean, as I say, I think we need, ultimately, I don't think any religion or religious person wants anybody to die, whether they are. I just think we should just treat human loss as human loss, regardless of whether it's.
And that is where politics perhaps is a much more powerful engine than religion is. Although I can't let your comments pass without pointing out that the foundation of the modern state of Israel as a Jewish homeland was a consequence of, in part was a consequence of Jewishness and Judaism being the criteria for the Holocaust. So you can see the historical balance or tension in that decision, in that process. Thank you, Rahaf. 10:48 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:52 is the time. It was the Telegraph, not the Times, today, where I read the commentary that I found most enlightening, which is a very rare thing for me to say, given that the comment pages of the Daily Telegraph are the most unintentionally hilarious outlet that this country's media has ever seen. You get a sort of long queue of people like David Frost and Nick Timothy, sort of coming from positions of abject failure politically, opining on why everyone should do what they think and why everyone should do what they want. Imagine that, the sort of architects of the hostile environment and the negotiator of Brexit both being paid to share their views on what politicians should be doing next. That's how mad. Thankfully, someone's written a book about exactly how mad everything is at the moment and exactly how the ecosystem in which all of the madness that was created could unfold. And I'm delighted to tell you it's out on November the 2nd. You can order it wherever you get your books. How They Broke Britain by some idiot called James O'Brien. But this piece by Paul Nuki in the Telegraph is really good. There is a reasonable chance Benjamin Netanyahu will be remembered as both Hamas's nemesis and its enabler. I recommend it because it crystallises something I've been trying to explain to you all week, and it quotes Tal Schneider, the Times of Israel columnist that I mentioned yesterday, who has written that the idea behind Netanyahu's policy was to prevent Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, prevent Mohammed Abbas or anyone else in the Palestinian Authority's West Bank government from advancing towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. And that, I think, sums up why everything's so hard to do without being either simplistic or blindly partisan. It's so hard to do. Condemn without any reservation whatsoever the Hamas attacks upon Israel. But that doesn't mean, I don't think, that you have to support everything that Israel does, quotes, in response, end quotes, or quotes, in retaliation, end quotes, or quotes, in revenge, end quotes. And I haven't got the question quite right today, which is not my fault, he says. It's a consequence of the topic. And so what I want to do is just look at everything that we've been talking about since last Monday through the lens of religion. That perhaps is how I should have phrased it, rather than having to turn it into questions, but to make it interrogatory. So why are we not talking more about religion? I think probably how important is religion to what is happening is better than why aren't we talking about religion. But then you get into the specifics of it, and it gets very, very, very tricky. Are people in Gaza currently being bombed because they are Muslim? Were Israelis killed by Hamas last weekend killed because they are Jewish? In which case, what role is religion playing in everything that is unfolding? I'm also, of course, always on a learning curve. This is from Syed, who says, many Orthodox Jews in the UK totally oppose the creation of Israel. They believe it's contrary to Judaism, and they attend Free Palestine marches and believe that all people in the land should live under one state called Palestine. It is something that you can Google. Thank you for that. I'm kind of aware of the existence of these positions, but not of the popularity of them. I don't know how anybody can be. I don't know who is. And then when you talk about the appalling instances of anti-Semitism on the streets of Britain, which we all balk at, you do wonder quite what words would be used to describe a national television presenter this morning asking a British Palestinian politician whether her family connections meant that she had early information about an imminent terror attack. I can't get over that. I really can't get over that. And I do think it's evidence, perhaps, it's evidence of imbalance. Isn't it? Some form of imbalance, some form of hierarchy. So I operate in the British media where somebody who's been in it for a lot longer than I have doesn't even pause to think whether it is appropriate to ask a British Palestinian woman if her family in Israel and in the Middle East, West Bank, if her family could have given her a quick heads up that there was going to be a massive terrorist atrocity last weekend, and there's no alarm in the back of his head. So I've got alarms going off in the back of my head pretty much all the time at the moment, thinking, no, that would be wrong, that's inappropriate, that doesn't mean what it is. And those alarms are so important. It's why you don't hear me talking about, BBC vocabulary or Wembley Stadium flags. It's not important to the much bigger picture. The stuff that is important, it's an absolute minefield, metaphorical minefield. But I think if you had to boil it down to a single digestible nugget, the idea that you can simultaneously condemn completely what happened in Israel last Saturday, while also somehow pray that Israel doesn't go as far as it seems destined to, and even perhaps as it already has, in response. And that is an intellectually fraught position, even for people who don't have any investment, which is why today felt like a good day for looking at it through the lens of religion. Tom's in Birmingham. Tom, what would you like to say?
I think that I don't think the bombing in Gaza is to do with religion particularly, but I think the failure of the two-state solution, the inevitable failure of the two-state solution is because of religion.
Why do you say inevitable?
So
you're about to tell me why you say it inevitable, aren't you?
There's so many holy sites in Jerusalem for Judaism and Islam that there's never going to be an agreement on how to split Israel.
Is it worth distinguishing between ownership and access at this point, or is that naive?
I don't think. I mean, you could. I'm sure at one point, but we've gone so far down the road that I don't think either side would trust the other side to grant them access.
Yeah.
This is why, if you look at the map of the West Bank, you've got sort of this finger that goes into the middle of it, which is where Jerusalem is.
Yes.
And when they talk about the settlements in the West Bank, the location of the settlements beyond the Green Line, the worry is that they will encircle Jerusalem, and they talk about facts on the ground, that they'll encircle Jerusalem, and then the land that would be granted to Israel in a two-state solution would include all of Jerusalem.
Which would not be ever agreed to by Palestinians.
Precisely. And when we say settlements, I mean, it sounds quite quaint, but some of the settlements are enormous. So some of the settlements are 80,000 people. Well, one of the settlements, Ariel, has a university.
So it's a de facto. What's the word you'd use? Because settlement, I think you're suggesting, is a bit of a euphemism.
Yeah, but we say settlements because ostensibly they're temporary.
Right.
Because they're against UN law. But if there was a giant peace agreement, Palestine's never going to get that land back. The cities are too big. And this is the worry. I mean, and obviously nothing justifies what Hamas has done. Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Yes.
But they're panicking. They're worried because Netanyahu supports settlements. And if you look at, I think it was 2018, they brought in the new nationalism law that said that something like the right to national self-determination is uniquely Jewish. It's hard to talk about it without talking about apartheid. Because
I was about to say that's where the word apartheid assumes a resonance that it didn't have before Benjamin Netanyahu was prime minister, I think.
Because legally, he's brought in laws that make makes Palestinians, that even if they lived in Jerusalem, it makes them a second-class citizen.
With fewer rights, less rights. And that is, you can call that second class, I think. I mean, apartheid always brings up images of South Africa and colour bars and segregation and what have you. But I suppose another definition of it would just be a hierarchy of basic rights.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of...
So from Hamas's point of view...
in India.
Yes, okay. So from Hamas's point of view, everything that is ever said on this programme by anybody is open to challenge by anybody else. I'd always make that point. And as we sort of grope towards better understanding of things, sometimes perhaps I go in the wrong direction. But I find what you say fascinating. So from Hamas's point of view, a situation of perpetual enmity, they're choosing between two situations of perpetual enmity, one in which they still have access to or dominion over some of the areas surrounding Jerusalem, even as Israel encroach further into them, or one in which Israel has essentially captured the entire environ of Jerusalem. So Hamas would still be in a state of perpetual war with Israel, but they would just have less land, including. And
if you look at the ceasefire, doesn't benefit the Hamas's cause, which is why the ceasefires always fail. If you look at the status quo when there is a ceasefire, Gaza, where Hamas controls, is surrounded completely.
Yes,
there's a few gates where you can pass through and goods can pass through, but it's surrounded. And how long would, if there was a ceasefire, a grand peace agreement, and there was a ceasefire, how long would Palestinians in these settlements have to sit tight and not do anything before the walls came down? It doesn't benefit them, the ceasefire.
No, I understand that. Good grief. So, I mean, I hesitate to ask you this question. What's your definition of a two-state solution then? Because it could never, you reject it out of hand, so we are just looking at perpetual bloodshed.
I don't think, because you've got the Dome of the Rock and Temple Mount,
yes.
And that's in East Jerusalem, but there are other holy sites, and I just don't think that
anyone's ever going to say you can have that. You can have that one.
Two tribes, for want of a better word, living side by side.
I don't think there is a better word, is there?
It's an old time word.
I know, yeah. But it does the job, doesn't it? It does the job. Tom, I'm incredibly late for the news, which is a compliment to how riveted I was, frankly, by your analysis and explanation. So thank you. It's 11:04.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
8 minutes after 11, a little later than I'd normally come back from a news break because of the call that we took just before it. Once again, evidence of how we have managed over our years together. Sound like an old married couple, don't we? All our years together. We've managed to elevate the radio phoning into territory that I'm not sure it had ever reached before, although there is always Idiot's Corner. To bring us back to reality. And Chris goes there today. So you may have heard me talk earlier about an idea being intellectually unsustainable. Now that of course, refers to the use of the word intellectual to describe or relate to the intellect, as opposed to a person being an intellectual. So if I say that idea is intellectually unsustainable, it means the intellect can't sustain it. You could describe it, if you like, as almost a synonym for cognitive dissonance. But Chris decided to get in touch saying James is labelling himself as an intellectual. Really? So, mate, that is stupid on so many different levels that it's almost heartbreaking that you won't be bright enough to understand just how many, or indeed just why. So even on a day like today, Idiot's Corner is still doing good, still doing brisk business. Back to the challenge. Well, the twin challenge of looking at events in Israel and Gaza through the lens of religion, and the question of whether or not it's important to do so, or whether or not it's possible not to. There you go. Rufus is in Stanmore. Rufus, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. The supporters of Israel and Palestine are a bit like football supporters. We really have great difficulty in seeing the merits of the other side. Anyway,
yes.
a quick look at geography and then religion. Until the 4th century, Jews were in the majority, then the Christians, then the Turks, then Britain. And the Muslims have a view that once they're in control of a land, it's theirs forever. So there's where some of the Muslim view comes from.
Yes.
If you look at the charter of Hamas and the PLO, they say from the river to the sea. Well, what does that mean? They want all of that land.
There was a slightly more nuanced conversation about that on the breakfast show today. But you are of course entitled to your analysis, which I think in the case of the Hamas Charter is definitely true. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who deploys that slogan today is talking about an eradication of Israel.
Absolutely. Now, 20% of the population of current Israel are Muslim, and they are those who choose to live peacefully in that land, and they work and they provide they're doctors and they're nurses and lawyers and they're in society. But you've then got those who don't accept and choose to live peacefully. And that's where the Hamas and PLO problems come from. So then that does come down to religion. And then you've got a bit of modern history. You suggested a while ago that the problem started after the Holocaust. Well, I'd like to take it back to 1880 with the pogroms in Russia, and the Jews decided to leave Russia, and some of them walked to Palestine, and so the population began to grow, and then the Sheikh of Palestine of Jerusalem, Sheikh Amin al-Husseini, in about 1930, He didn't like the fact that there were so many Jewish people coming in, and they were buying up some of the land, and he thought that the Jews were going to overrun the land. And he issued a fatwa of blessed is he who kills a Jew.
And
so
this is 100% religion.
Yes. And then he went and spoke to the Iranians, and he spoke to Hitler, and he said, look, if you want to get rid of the Jews and you send them to me, well, that's not going to work because we don't want them, so why don't you just kill them? So that helped the Nazis. But modern-day Israel, if you choose to live peacefully in that land, you are welcome. There are hundreds of different religions and people living there.
This is where I will push back a little, because I think your analysis is ignoring the nation-state law, isn't it?
Well, I don't know the nuances of that.
It's 5 years old, and it states that the right to exercise national self-determination in Israel is unique to the Jewish people. It downgrades Arabic as a language to a special status, and it establishes, and I'm quoting, Jewish settlement as a national value, and it mandates that the state will labour to encourage and promote its establishment and development. And those settlements are, I think, in contravention of United Nations resolutions. So I think and I know it wasn't your intention, but in another man's mouth, it might have sounded a little disingenuous to talk about people who wish to live in peace when they are being rendered second class by legislation.
Well, I see the street signs in Israel, and they're in Hebrew and English and Arabic.
Yes. But I'm reading you words from legislation that has been passed in the Knesset.
I was in a hospital in Israel, and I was treated by 7.
I know, but
Arab
this
doctors.
is. I'm reading you laws.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're responding with anecdotes.
Okay.
That's okay. We don't have to do more. You've made an excellent contribution already, but I just had to point out that it's a contribution that completely ignores the last 5 years of Netanyahu's government and the entire point of the nation-state law. And Hamas existed before the nation-state law, so it's not a game changer or a zinger, but it is very intrinsic to what you've said.
Okay.
I think I know it is actually. That's why I read it out. Rufus, thank you. David's in. Well, hang on, it's 11:15.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 11, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we continue talking about the escalating situation in the Middle East, because that word escalating is one of the most frightening in the English language, particularly when you are contemplating war or war-like scenarios. And I am drawn once again to this analysis in the Telegraph today about what is described as a reasonable chance Benjamin Netanyahu will be remembered as both Hamas's nemesis and its enabler, because however proportionate or disproportionate the response is to last weekend's terror attack, the support for it, if it in some way is a consequence of policies pursued by the man governing Israel, becomes, I think, intellectually and morally very, very difficult. Very difficult. 19 after 11 is the time. So how would you describe the role of religion in this 21st century conflagration? David is in Brighton. David, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Hi. Right, I'm a regular listener to your programme.
Thank you.
I am an old man.
Yeah. Aren't we all, David?
Yeah, well, I'm older. Yeah, right, okay. Okay, so I'm 81. So
right.
I was born in 1942, and I've been, I'm an adult teacher of politics.
Okay.
And I have been fascinated from my youth in anti-Semitism, in the origins of Christianity and the split between Judaism and Christianity.
Yes.
And I'm also a student of Islam and have read quite a few books about the history of of Islam.
Okay.
Now, I've got in front of me on my desk here, on my small little computer desk, two little books. One is by a man called Tariq Fatah, and it's called The Jew Is Not My Enemy.
Yeah.
And it's all about the relationship between Jews and Muslims. And I've got another book by Jeffrey Weidlinger, In the Midst of Civilized Europe. The subtitle is The 1918-1921 Pogroms in Ukraine and the Onset of the Holocaust, in which he says that between the years 1918, 1919, 1921, well over 1 million Jews were killed in pogroms in mostly the Ukraine.
Yes.
During the Russian Civil War. Now, okay, so you've opened a very large subject.
You can say that again, and somewhat ridiculously, I do have to remind you of the constraints of time, David.
Okay, right. Okay, so I'm sort of getting into the fact that last week your emphasis on the what's been happening, the events, is all on the level of the moral plane about killing, the morality of killing.
That was certainly true of one or two of the 5 shows we did last week.
Oh, all right, okay. And this week now it's religion. Now
today,
I think.
Not yesterday.
I think what's in play here, James,
yes,
is the relationship between what we call religion and what we call politics. Now, these are now in the Western side, in the Western mind, 2 separate categories: religion on the one hand and politics on the other. But in fact, in history, you'll find that they're often one of the same. That's
in that case,
phenomenon.
Well, I understand exactly what you're saying. I'm not sure it needed to be said yet. I think it's fairly clear because
this is the kicker.
Well, no, hang on, because what I'm perhaps I think I've been fairly clear. Today's conversation is about the role played by religious belief, I think, rather than religiosity or religiousness.
Religious belief, religious identity, I think, is what you're looking for. Religious identity.
It's possibly religious identity, but as a consequence of religious belief.
Well,
which is distinct from politics,
of course. Hold it, James. Jews.
Well, okay, I'm holding it.
Some Jews are religious.
Yes.
Some Jews are not religious. Now, can we say the same of Muslims?
Yes.
Some Muslims are religious. Some Muslims are not religious. But here's the kicker.
Okay.
If the majority of Muslim clerics and thinkers would say that a Muslim who is not religious is an apostate.
Right.
And is worthy of death in the ultimate.
I don't think the majority of Muslim clerics would call for the death of unbelievers.
Well, what I'm saying to you is
that is what you just said. I definitely heard those words, and I'm saying that's not true.
But I'm saying that it's very difficult not to generalize because
we do okay.
Okay, right. So I'm generalizing here.
Yes.
So if you look at the history,
well, you're also being quite offensive, David. I'm sure it's not your intention, but you can't just say most Muslim clerics want non-believers to be put to death and then sort of gloss over it and describe it as a generalization.
Well,
unless you truly believe it.
Going a bit too far.
Perhaps going a bit too far. Yes.
What I'm trying to say is that Judaism is religion. Okay.
Yes.
Now, how can you be Jewish and not follow the religion? The answer is because the Jews are a people.
Yes, and this is where you meant religious identity.
Yeah, the Jews are a people.
Yes.
Now, so if you're on
so what you've got is one word to describe Jews and 2 words, Muslim and Arab, to describe people in Gaza.
Yes, but what's happened in the last 30 years, as I was saying to your producer before, is that what's become political is now religious, and Iran is the perfect example of that. So you have it's the Islamic Republic of Iran.
My temptation at this point would be to focus in on more issues rather than broader stuff we've already perhaps mentioned and articulated, rather than broadening it out even further. because we started in the 1880s.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get,
yes.
Well, it's a very big subject.
You can say that again, and I do have to get some other calls on before the news. So
I know you do.
So
I know you do.
let me hit you with the horrible question.
Yes.
The people who will die in Gaza today.
Yes.
What role is religion playing in their death? What role is their religion playing in their death?
The role is that Hamas is as you rightly said at the beginning of the program, is the Islamic resistance movement.
Yes, but the people
Hamas
dying today are not Hamas. They're not Hamas.
Hamas is not interested in secular political divisions of territory into Palestinians over
but
here.
I'm not talking about
Egyptians
Hamas.
over
I'm
there.
not talking about Hamas. I'm talking about an 8-year-old boy who's going to die today.
Well, yes, the result, yes, I know, and it's terrible, and it's happening because of the events of Saturday.
But is it happening because of his religion?
No, of course not. Of course not. So when Israel is attacking Gaza, which they are,
yes,
and killing Arabs and Palestinians, which they are, that's not out of any religious impulse. When Hamas sent in their 1,000, 2,000 people to slaughter the Jews of southern Israel, as in a pogrom, as in Eastern Europe and Russia in the 19th century and early 20th century, they were doing that because they were Jews.
Not
because
entirely
Israel
because
is
they
a
were
Jewish
Jews,
state,
because otherwise the
and
word occupation wouldn't be part of the conversation, would it? But they were doing it because those people who are Jews are in that part of the world.
Correct. They're in that part of the world because
which makes it different from a
pogrom.
Which makes it different from a pogrom, oddly.
No,
it does,
because
it would have to have been an attack on people who were sort of living as a minority in another country, being attacked by the majority for it to be a pogrom. This was an attack by a minority in a territory on a majority. So I think
no, I don't.
Well,
I think
it was
that's a rather twisted definition of a pogrom.
Well, maybe it is, but statistically they're two very, very different things. That's all. And here's the thing, and I think you're right, and I've understood most of what you've said. But here's the thing: if something is undertaken for religious reasons, how can the response not be religious?
Because someone might be responding for other reasons. It's very simple.
It's not.
It is.
No, it isn't. It's like a counterbalance. It's like if I push for religious reasons and you push back against my religious reasons, that is a religious process.
No, but the pushback is against the violence, not against the reasons for the violence.
The pushback is violence.
Yes, but it's not the pushback. Yeah, but it's got nothing to do with religion at that point.
But of course it has, because you wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for religion.
Who's not doing what?
There'd be no pushing. There'd be nothing to be pushed. There'd be nothing to be pushing back against if it wasn't for religion.
You live here,
yes,
and you're being pogromed. Okay, you're being slaughtered in the most despicable, brutalistic ways.
Yes,
right, with very sadistic ways, right.
Because of your religion.
Because
of your religion.
Not just because you're occupiers. These are Jewish occupiers.
Yes.
So I'm saying there's a So the point is that
we are going to have to go to the news.
Christianity has come to terms with Jews.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
but
kind
Islam
of. I mean,
has not yet come to terms with Jews.
Post 1945, you're talking now, are you?
I'm talking.
You don't have to go back very far in your life, David, to find fairly compelling evidence of Christianity not having come to terms with Jews at all.
They came to terms with Jews in sort of the wider political historical sense in the 18th century.
Well, then what was the Holocaust all about then?
The Holocaust was about racism.
Oh.
So Jews, there are two types of anti-Semitism.
We've got all the way up to the news, and I've enjoyed talking to you enormously, and I hope I do so again. But you understand that there are 1.4 million people listening, so I can't really let one of those many have much more time than I've allowed you. It's 11:30. Thomas Watts is here with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
34 minutes after 11, and it is a jigsaw of linguistic, illusory, conceptual manipulation, according to Russell, which is quite a mouthful, isn't it? But on we go. And I'm not sure that there is any solution to what is happening, but I felt that religion was the element of the conversation that hadn't been properly explored. We'll explore it for a little longer, and then the conversation about the decision about what we talk about next will be taken together. Nimrod's in Barnet. Nimrod, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm a British Israeli Jew, and as such, I think I've got a bit of perspective here on so maybe the double meaning of the word Jewish or Judaism. Well, Judaism is a religion, but it is also a national, ethnic, cultural identity.
Yes.
And I think if you look at Israel as a Jewish state, it has almost none of the religious significance that you would expect to have in a Jewish religious state. But on the flip side of it, it is the state of the Jewish people, and that is very largely defined as people who have Jewish heritage. So that is a very national definition, and that is, I think, sort of the core of Zionism as a movement, was to create or to bring to surface the national element of Judaism. And I think when Israel fights to defend itself, it fights for the nation, not for religious reasons. I also don't think it is 100% a religious war from Hamas's perspective.
That just before we move on to Hamas, let's just explore that a little further. I mean, you're obviously right. To take it to its most brutal conclusion, the Holocaust was not undertaken because of the religious beliefs of Jewish people.
Yeah, I will probably not hang my identity on the way Nazis have seen what Jews are.
The foundation of the state of Israel all week has been, for me, almost inextricable from that question of where do we go.
I find the position slightly dodgy because, first of all, Zionism preceded the Holocaust.
Yes, it did, of course.
And Jewish nationalism preceded the Holocaust.
Yes.
But also because the relationship of the Jewish people to the land of Judea, to what we call today the land of Israel, is historically much, much older than 1945, 1939. It's not been created by the Nazis, and the Jewish national identity has not been created by the Nazis.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that sort of seeking a unique status in history? The ebb and flow of humanity across territories. It's only perhaps because the Jewish identity, because of religion, is uniquely codified that you can talk about that. Because how many of us, when we do those genealogy tests, how many of us have got particularly deep links with the part of the world that we live in? Nowhere near as many as we thought.
I mean, I'm Jewish and I don't live in Israel at the moment. I live in Barnet, as you said. But that doesn't mean that I don't have a relationship, a spiritual relationship to the place where my ancestry came from.
Yes.
We've seen,
but then so do Muslims.
We've seen diasporic populations.
So do Muslims have and I hope you're not going to say, but mine is older.
No, absolutely not. And I absolutely 100% accept not only the Muslim general spiritual relationship to the land of Israel and to Jerusalem specifically, but also the Palestinian claim that they are as a nation. They are a nation that was born in that region. That's why I think the people should share it. I think this is a faith that's shared by a lot of Israelis and unfortunately not enough Palestinians at the moment. But that is, I think, besides the point. But that's land, not religion.
Yes, I understand
nationality, not religion. Now, on the events of October 7th, there were several occasions of non-Jews being brutally attacked. We know of one, or more than one. We know of a few Thai foreign workers.
It was an indiscriminate terror attack. I think
we know of a Muslim Arab doctor.
Yes,
knowingly attacked, even though he had made it very clear he was a Muslim Arab. So, can we say that it was Islam guiding these attacks? I don't think so. I think Hamas are calling themselves an Islamic organization, but I think they would sooner kill Muslims than let the state of Israel exist in any borders and in any form.
They would see the Muslim doctor as some sort of collaborator.
I don't even think that's the thing. I think it's not different than when Hamas is preventing people from leaving an area they know is going to be bombarded.
Yeah.
They don't care about
humanity,
Palestinian lives or human lives, regardless of religion. They care that the state of Israel will not exist in any borders. We're not talking about 1967 borders. We're talking about from the river to the sea. That's the chant. From the river to the sea is a genocidal chant.
Well, specifically when Hamas use it is. I think it's a little bit more nuanced when other people use it, but I didn't think that until I heard callers to Nick's show this morning, so I'm just being a bit pedantic.
How is it not? There are two people between the river and the sea.
I heard a couple. There were a couple of callers who claimed that freedom didn't involve expulsion or removal. So I'm not one of them, and I wasn't. I'm just saying that was a perspective that was, I thought, represented fairly effectively earlier on LBC, but I wasn't there and you weren't listening, so I'm just putting it in the mix. Otherwise, in the context of Hamas, of course it's a genocidal ambition. Of course it's or at least a ethnic cleansing, if not genocide. And that's helpful. It's not helpful in terms of optimism, but it's helpful in terms of it's helpful in terms of comprehension.
I'll tell you something about optimism, James, if you'll allow me, and that is that. So, as a Jewish person, about 10 days after the October 7th events, I really find it difficult to be optimistic.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that as someone who has been a peace activist for the vast majority of his life before we've left Israel. And one of the reasons I've left Israel is that I didn't want to take part in what's going on there anymore. I didn't want my taxpayers' money to pay for the actions of the military in the West Bank, etc. And it's heartbreaking for me to be in this position where I'm thinking, you know what? This is the level of hatred that we're seeing. This is the level of can that be abridged? I don't think it can.
Can it be excised?
With someone who can decapitate a baby?
I don't think you can. I'm not that. Again, that story. I'm not. Has it been completely confirmed? But it doesn't matter. I'm perfectly happy to believe that it's possible. Can it be excised? So
in what way?
Well, can it be cut out like a cancer, which is what Netanyahu seems to believe?
Well, I'm sure it can, but at what cost? We are having discussions about the cost of that excision for the part, and you in your radio show, by the way, very sensitively, been having these discussions for the past week.
Yes.
Because the moment that the Israeli reaction became tragically one that involves the death of civilians, we start asking about the price.
Yes.
So I completely accept that Hamas, the excision of Hamas and the destruction of Hamas is a worthy goal. You've asked that question a few days ago in your.
I think everything comes down to this, to what you're about to say, doesn't it?
Yeah. You've asked the question on Friday, I think. But at what cost? How many? You've asked, I think, a bit of a flippant question, if I may.
Of course.
How many dead children? Dead Palestinian children are worthy?
Are too many?
Are too many.
Yeah.
I think it was telling that you didn't ask the pro-Palestinian caller who called you from Watford, I forgot her name, how many dead Israeli children are a worthy price to pay for free Palestine.
But she wasn't supporting Hamas, though.
She wasn't supporting Hamas, no, but she was
So if she had been, I think if she was supporting Hamas, I probably wouldn't have put her on air. But if she'd come close to offering up support for what happened on October the 7th, of course I would have asked her how many dead Israelis would be there.
But saying things like, let's look at October 7th in context, is justifying, even if it's not supporting. It's providing justification. And we need to ask that question. We need to ask, we're looking at two worthy goals. I believe that Palestinian independence is a worthy goal. I believe that the decision of Hamas is a worthy goal. By the way, not least because it stands in the way of Palestinian independence.
Which Netanyahu understands all too well, which brings us back to another sort of Gordian knot of political complexity, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So do you know what? I was going to push back, Nimrod, and talk about why optimism was both important and possible, but you've just robbed me of the ability to do that with your last 8 sentences.
You know what? I'm sorry. But I'll tell you something else. If you're looking for optimism these days, I wouldn't look at your Jewish friends for it.
I hear you. I do. And I'm sorry. I really am. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:47. We nearly got there. Thank you. 2 hours of... I find it very simultaneously fascinating and challenging. I thought Nimrod got to the heart of the matter there with that reference at the end towards optimism and the impossibility of it, because, probably in historical terms, we're still in the earlier stages of this crisis, for want of a better word. 11:48 is the time, but it's been an enlightening conversation in many ways. At least I've got one satisfied listener. Hi, James. I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful to hear all your logical conversations with people, because it helps me to think twice about things and also improve my English as well at the same time. Thank you, sir. Well, thank you, sir. It's always nice to be appreciated. Malcolm's in Tel Aviv. Malcolm, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
I don't think it has a religious basis to this, because when Israel goes into Gaza, they're not fighting people because they're Muslim or support Islam. They're at the moment trying to get rid of Hamas, which is a different entity. Bear in mind that Jews aren't allowed to live in Gaza anyway. What would be interesting is if Jews were living in Gaza, would Israel still be attacking? I think the question would be yes, because they still need to get rid of the terrorists. Unfortunately, we've got 100-odd plus now Jews in Gaza, not by choice.
You mean soldiers?
No, I'm talking about the hostages.
Oh, okay. So I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But Israel is still attacking. So you can't say that's an a religious thing. Last night we had 4 rocket attacks towards Tel Aviv, and part of Tel Aviv is Jaffa. We have various mosques. So I don't think, even the Hamas, I don't think it's a religious thing. They just want to get rid of Israel, period.
Yes.
Again, there was...
But then if I say why, you're going to struggle to answer that question without bringing religion into it.
Why? They just want Palestine. They just want... I don't think they just want a Muslim country, because obviously there's a lot of Arab Christians. So on that point, you're probably right. Maybe it's a religious thing on that. But then again, just forget Jaffa for a minute, even Hezbollah in up north, they're targeting places like Akko and Haifa, which has a very large Arab, Christian and Muslim population. I personally just think they just want to destroy Israel, regardless of who you are. They don't care if you're Muslim, Christian, Buddhist.
Yeah, I think you're right, probably. I mean, it's pretty close to what it says in their charter, isn't it? But it's also an impossible ambition. And so in the absence of an achievable ambition, they just want to kill as many Israelis as they can when they get the chance.
Yeah, and it's irrelevant of their religion. If they're Israeli, they're Israeli. If it just happens to be a tourist,
well, that's as with all terror attacks, isn't it? But I don't conflate the actions of the Israeli army with the actions of Hamas. But I do refuse to see the death of an Israeli child as being in any way more or less poignant and heartbreaking than the death of a Palestinian child or the death of a child in Gaza. Where do you derive your confidence that what the Israeli army is doing now and will do next has a realistic prospect of wiping out Hamas forever?
I don't think they can.
So why are they doing this then?
I think you know, I'm a news cameraman, so I've been in the West Bank. I've been with Palestinian and Israeli doctors working every Saturday in an Arab village in the West Bank for free, giving out treatment. So I've seen both sides.
Yeah.
You never get. I mean, I think you mentioned this yesterday. How can you stop Hamas going from the north to the south?
Yeah, well, exactly.
You can't, because they're how are you going to get rid of all the Hamas? The answer is it's impossible.
So then, what are these deaths for then? These civilian deaths?
What are they for? They're for trying to get rid of as much of the terrorist factor as possible. And unfortunately, on both sides, you're going to get, and I told you, producer, I'm not going to use collateral damage, I hate that word. You're going to get
civilians
deaths on both sides, yes.
But that's closer to conflating, isn't it, than I have gone. You sort of... That's the problem, isn't it? You can call it a terrorist atrocity, and then you can talk about civilian deaths as being the inevitable upshot of a terrorist atrocity. But then what is the response if it's also going to cause countless civilian deaths without any guarantee of an objective being achieved, or without any prospect of the objective being achieved? Really? And even if you if you could somehow magically identify everyone who is a member of Hamas today and kill them, those places would be filled tomorrow by what is going to happen to people who aren't members of Hamas in Gaza in the next weeks.
And of course, the other problem is you're now forcing people from the north to the south, and Hamas is just going to say to them, "Look, see what those Israelis have done to you."
Well, yes, precisely. That becomes a sort of recruiting sergeant for future membership or future jihad or whatever you want to call it. Malcolm, thank you, and stay safe. It can't be a happy experience from any angle. What's going on in your part of the world at the moment? It's coming up to 11:54. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I am going to play you that clip of Richard Madeley again, because I suspect we'll talk about it tomorrow. Or maybe talk about it after 12. I think this is... I know he's a bit of a lemon, and the partridge is strong in him. But and there might be an explanation for this not being as obnoxious as it originally appears. But I'm going to play you Richard Madeley asking a British Palestinian member of the British Parliament whether or not her family gave her a heads up on a terror attack last weekend. And I'm going to need a lot of convincing. That wouldn't be like asking me if I knew anything about that IRA bombing last month. There wasn't an IRA bombing last month, thank God. But you take my point.
They have more and more people coming to the church because you seek sanctuary in a church. That's what you do. And, to the why don't they just move? Because I'm thinking to myself, why, when you know that something's coming, why don't you move? And then to hear, well, actually, they have nowhere to go to. And remember, there's no way to communicate with other people in southern Gaza. So what are you meant to do? You haven't got a car. There's no phone battery. So you can't get in a car. They're too frail anyway, one of them. And they're there as a family unit. So I'm hearing what's happening from them through one of the sisters who is the cousin of my mother. So my immediate family is in the West Bank. They're in Jerusalem, Ramallah and Jericho. Thank goodness so far. They are very scared about what comes next, and they're fine. But this pocket of the extended family, we are desperately worried about. It needs to stop.
Your family connections in Gaza. Did you have any indication of what was going to happen 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago? Was there any word on the street in Gaza?
Absolutely extraordinary. Well, anyway, there we are. I don't know what the corollary of that would be. Do you know what I mean? The counterfactual. If you were talking to a British Jewish MP, a British Israeli MP, what question could Richard Madeley ask that would be as crass and as inappropriate as what he just asked Layla Moran? I can't think, actually. I've got another Layla. I presume it's a different Layla in Archway. Layla, what would you like to say?
Well, just hearing that Richard Madeley talking, he's just racist. Simple as fact, and his mouth slipped live on air today. There's no other excuse for that.
There might be. He might just be very stupid.
No, it's not. Jay,
he might have thought there's so many people getting ready to attack Israel that people in Gaza must have known something about it. Maybe. But anyway, how dare you come on this programme and put me in a position of trying to defend Richard Madeley? I think reaching quite so robustly for the word racist just spooked me a little, Layla. But you carry on telling me why you rang in.
Okay, so I rang in, James, sorry. James,
not Richard. Definitely not Richard.
I'm a black British Muslim woman, right?
Yeah.
And I'm also a mental health worker. So the last few days, since the Hamas attack on Israel on last weekend, I went through 100 different emotions. Every other day, there's a different emotion coming on, to the point where I had to ask family, friends, and myself as well, to switch off the TV, switch off the news every now and then, and just sort of not listen to all of this negative and both sides, people being killed.
Yeah.
I think your question with where religion plays in terms of that part of the world, there's a context of history, and it goes many hundred years back, which, I don't really know that much extent of that history in that part of the world. But from what I'm seeing today, I think in terms of the reaction, the media, the British government in particular as well, there's a lot of conscious racism towards the people from Gaza in regards to their ethnicity, being from an Arab background, and also being Muslims. And this, with Islam in particular, that name since 9/11 has been associated with terrorism and every single negative thing you can actually think of in the world. So I think when I'm hearing on LBC a lot of Israeli voices, and that's not a bad thing. I like to know what they're going through, what their experience is. But I would also like to hear a lot more voices from people from Gaza in particular.
Yes.
Whether they live in Gaza or they're Palestinians that live outside.
So would I.
Yeah. But I think in regards to just the reaction, the world's reaction to what's happening, there is conscious racism, Islamophobia towards these people. And my heart just breaks for them. And I'm not really sure what the solution is. I would love to say, everyone sit down, let's have a conversation, let's try to negotiate things, let's try to come to a middle ground. Because if we're going to peel back the layers, everyone has biases, in terms of what side you're kind of leaning yourself towards, and everyone has their own perspective of what's going on. In regards to Hamas being a terrorist organization, some people would say actually, one man's terrorism is another man's freedom fighter.
They would.
So we all have our own perspective, but that's not going to help what's happening in Gaza. It's not going to help what's happening in Israel. And we can say, religion does this and religion does that. But actually, if we just take religion out of the equation, every child that's being killed, there's a mother out there crying today.
I hear
I've just heard on the news the 13-year-old Israeli girl that was kidnapped and now being murdered. How's that family feeling? And then you look at the other side. How is the other family with all these other Gazan children being killed as well?
And that seems, you've taken me right up to the news, Layla. Sorry. I guess I sense you haven't quite finished. But that is where we begin and end on so many mornings at the moment with that, what seems so obvious to so many is out of reach to others. Just that simple fact that you all move towards a place where every child's life is equal, and then the question of who is prepared to take those lives assumes a slightly different complexion. Layla, thank you. We're going to talk about prison sentences next, I think, which I suppose in the context almost feels like light relief. It's 12:01.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 12 is the time. Do you know they're banning glue traps for rats in Wales? There are fears that the consequences could be catastrophic. In the words of one pest controller, there will be rats the size of cats running free in the streets. I hope he's wrong, because otherwise we might have to turn our attention. I used to do phone-ins about rats quite regularly because it was almost like a form of masochism. I used to be quite phobic. I don't think I am anymore. But you'd tell me your stories of rat infestations, and I would sit here literally kind of quivering in horror. But I don't think that would work anymore. Anyway, don't worry. I don't know why I've told you that. I'm not talking about it now. I'm talking about something completely different. I would like to confine, if I can, and this might be tricky actually, thinking that we've just come off the back of 2 fairly heavy hours, but I'd like to confine the coming conversation to people who've been to prison for short amounts of time. Even as I say those words out loud, I'm not sure how big the constituency is of people that I'm talking to. That there are 2 ways of looking at a story that is a little bit remarkable. Actually, there are 3. So it was announced yesterday by a Justice Minister called Greg Chalk, I think. Alex Chalk, beg your pardon. Where did I get Greg from? That prisoners, even if they've committed quite serious crimes, prisoners who are not deemed to be much of a risk to the public are going to be released early because the prisons are full. So they need to free up some space to put the new convicts in. And in order to do that, they're going to let out some of the older convicts earlier than they would otherwise have been let out. Now, I'm not sure yet what the phone-in is on this, but have you ever heard anything more mad in your life? I'm not a hang 'em, flog 'em tabloid twerp, right? And I think that prisoners' punishment is fairly silly instead of prisoners' rehabilitation being a way of making the population safer and the country nicer. But neither am I naive. Neither am I some sort of touchy-feely muesli muncher. Nothing wrong with muesli, by the way. But I certainly don't believe in no justice and no punishment. But whatever your perspective is on prison, this is the worst of all imaginable worlds. Because if you think that we imprison too many people, right, then freeing up more spaces to imprison more people is a bad thing. If you think that we don't imprison enough people, or that sentences aren't long enough, you are probably a contender for Idiot's Corner, but you could have been a member of any of the last 6 or 7 governments, going all the way back to Tony Blair. Then this is going to be awful because they're letting people out. And that element of it, I guess, is perhaps the most inflammatory, but I'm not sure it's the most interesting. I think Ken Clarke did this, and I know that David Gauke, a former Justice Secretary, has called for it. He wanted a ban on all sentences under 6 months, partly to ease the pressure, but largely because they are completely pointless. And I just don't know whether that is true or not. And I've got absolutely no way of knowing. You know, the more I do this job, the more I feel qualified to comment on the more topics that we do together. Because sometimes you don't need lived experience if you've spoken to loads of people with it. But there are still, I should, as ever, make it clear, I'm speaking specifically about England and presumably Wales. The situation in Scotland is different, for reasons that I might invite someone to ring in and tell me, actually, but not yet, because I want to get the conversation well established. You are chairman of the Prisons Association saying yesterday there is no room left at the inn. God, Christmas comes around earlier every year, doesn't it? There's no room left at the inn. We've been overcrowded for decades through successive governments. Nobody wanted to deal with it, and now we find ourselves, after 13 years of Tory rule, with no space at all. There are fewer than 600 spaces left in the entire prison estate and fewer than 150 in men's prisons. I'll tell you one thing for nothing. However bad it is, if the criminal justice system was operating at anything like an acceptable level, it would be infinitely worse. Because the number of people that haven't come to trial, the number of cases that haven't come to trial, or the number of sentencings that haven't actually been handed down yet, they're off the charts. So even with a busted flush of a criminal justice system, the prisons are full to bursting. What's to be done? Somebody suggested yesterday they would put porter cabins in prison yards and have what could be loosely described as pop-up prison cells. Now, the phrase pop-up is normally applied to restaurants and shops. You have a pop-up shop where you haven't taken out a permanent lease on the place, but in order to accommodate, a property development or a holiday season, you pop up, or you're a restaurateur and you're not ready to go all in yet. The investment involved, so you kind of do an almost camping style setup. You have a pop-up restaurant, pop-up prison cells. So there's 2 things there already. You've got prisoners who've done big bad crimes being released in order to free up space for new prisoners, only about 18 days early, but still, it's early. You've got pop-up prison cells being put up in prison yards, and everyone's sort of sitting around after 13 years of Tory rule, completely ignoring the fact that this lot are normally the ones that are banging on about what a great job they're going to do in the context of law and order. It's another morning where everything feels slightly comical, doesn't it? And of course, Suella Braverman, as Fella points out, is constantly making announcements about the latest bunch of people that she wants to lock in jail for waving the wrong flag, or not in the case of a Hamas flag, but waving a Palestinian flag or waving something or saying something that she finds odd. Not lock them up. Lock them. How are you going to lock them up for that if you're letting murderers out early, albeit only 18 days early? But that's just another mark of the madness that we currently inhabit, I think, isn't it? You're just sitting here. What are you being told to get angry about at the moment? I find it so hard to keep up when you've got something going on like the situation in Gaza, the usual bogus culture war invitation. I know you're supposed to be furious with the BBC about something or other, but what are the other invitations? Is it transgender toilets back in the game yet? Are you supposed to be getting furious about transgender toilets? I went to a transgender toilet the other day, and I came out of the cubicle. I was at the theatre. I was watching a rather splendid show at the Lyric Theatre in Hammersmith called The Empress. And I came out of the toilet and I thought I'd made a terrible mistake because it was full of ladies. And I'm using the word ladies in the context of toilets because they're usually called the ladies. And it was, women doing their makeup in the mirror and having a bit of a natter. And I honestly thought I'd made a terrible mistake and I'd actually gone into the ladies by accident. I was the only bloke in there. So I was washing my hands. I didn't feel uncomfortable, except insofar as I thought I might have gone into the wrong facilities. But it did sort of remind me that it's been a while since anyone was trying to terrify us about the existence of non-gendered toilets. But I don't know what you're supposed to be getting angry about. But I do know this. The people in the business of making you get angry about the things that you shouldn't be getting angry about. Oh, the barges. How did we get... Thank you, Guy in Torquay, reminds us. They've forgotten about the barges because it all went horribly wrong. Suella Braverman just moves on to something else. Rwanda. Barges. There's no people on the barges yet, and we're paying millions of quids in order to keep them floating around. But the people who are constantly telling you to get angry about things that you shouldn't be getting angry about, they should be telling you to get flipping furious. Surely about prisoners being released from prison early and about pop-up prison cells in prison yards. I mean, what do we pay these people for? Politicians, I mean, not prison officers. We barely pay them at all, which is, of course, a huge part of the problems that the Tories have presided over for the last 13 years. But that's not what I want to talk to you about either. I don't want to do the systemic problems. Jack, I've been in touch to give it a quick idiot's guide to what they may be. We've done the systemic problem. Why are our prisons full? And we understand some of the answers to that. But what I want to talk about is the efficacy, I quite like that word, the effectiveness, if you prefer, of short prison sentences. So I am going to say less than a year. Alex Chalk yesterday suggested that jail sentences of less than a year will be scrapped for most criminals under government plans to tackle the prison's overcrowding crisis. This puts the Conservative government, who are historically incredibly keen to lock people up for all sorts of offences, including climbing bridges in a protest against the lethargic response to climate change. We'll all have favourites of people we don't think should have been locked up. But this puts the actual Tories, no wonder it's relegated to a tiny little nib at the bottom of the front page of the Telegraph. This puts the actual Tories in the position of not being able to send wrong-uns to jail anymore. Successive governments pursuing policies designed to delight tabloid idiots, tabloid editing idiots, who are constantly banging on about prisons being like Butlins. It's all their fault that the political response to that ludicrous, ridiculous, half-brained rhetoric has been to send more and more and more and more people to jail. And now there aren't enough jail cells to cope with all the people being sent to jail by politicians desperate to appease tabloid editing idiots. So what's the response? Oh, we're not going to send people to jail at all. It's almost impossible to think of a more symmetrical example of stupidity at a political and media level. I can't believe it didn't happen in time to make my new book, which is largely about the conjunction of stupidity at a political and media level, although there's a fat side order of malevolence as well. And the malevolence of the tabloid editing idiots banging on about prisons being like holiday camps and insisting that people get locked up for less and longer has completely created a situation in which the prisons are all full. And how did the right-wing government respond to it? By not sending people to prison at all. But that's not what I want to talk about either. What I want to talk about is a short prison sentence and whether it worked. Ideally on you, but given the limitations of this genre, I will accept testimony from you if it is someone that you know. Do short prison sentences, and I'm going to say prison sentences of less than a year, do they do good? Do they do more harm than good? Do they do nothing at all? Or do they do anything? So you have been to prison. It has been less than a year to which you were sentenced, which means you do not need to tell me what you were imprisoned for, although my natural curiosity will kick in and I will want to know, as will most people listening, but you don't have to tell us if you really don't want to. I'd rather you did. I guess it's kind of going to be relevant to the question of reoffending, isn't it? But a prison sentence of less than 12 months, does it do anything? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. So what sort of crimes get people sent down for less than 12 months? And what does a sentence of that sort of length actually achieve? And you are allowed to answer absolutely nothing, James. 0345 6060 973. Give me a call now. You will get through. It's 12:17.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 12 is the time, and it's absolute madness. Absolute madness. The state of prisons and the criminal justice system in general. But we live in such a weird country now that all of the print media, which of course sets the agenda for much of the public discourse, it can't really do anything. It's brought in Brexit, it brought in Boris Johnson, it's championed people like Peter Bone, and the people that they've put in charge for the last 13 years have presided over a decline and collapse in almost every single aspect of our country. And of course, the people you rely upon to hold politicians accountable or to report reality to you can't, because they've been completely complicit in the chaos and catastrophe that the country has had imposed upon it. But hey-ho, on we go. Luke's in Letchworth to talk about short prison sentences. Luke, what happened?
Where do I start? So I was a 20-year-old young lad on a night out with a group of friends and got to the point of being so drunk, I didn't know what was going on, basically.
Yeah.
And a group of my friends got into an altercation with other groups, or with another group, and me being myself got involved.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at the time I had a bottle of beer in my hand.
Oh, dear. So you bottled someone?
Well, not in the typical action you would think of. No, I didn't have the bottle by the neck of the drink.
Yeah.
I had it as you would drink it.
Okay.
And my initial reaction was to punch, unfortunately. So yeah, that's what happened. And then obviously, because of the person's injuries, nothing serious happened to him other than a few cuts.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's bringing back a few emotions from when it happened.
Of course it is. Yeah.
Obviously, I was, young, drunk and stupid. But yeah, so I was sentenced to 6 months in prison.
GBH,
yeah, without intent.
Okay.
So yeah, I was sentenced to 6 months, of which I only served a month and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, and I ended up all over the country in just a small month and a half I was there. Ended up in Birmingham and Liverpool, bearing in mind I'm from London. I don't know how that happened. And yeah, so but back to the question, I guess. I learned my lesson from that.
That's interesting.
From that short stint in jail.
So you would have got into fights quite routinely?
It did happen quite a lot, yeah.
And then after going to jail, you never got into fights again?
Never since. This was 15 years ago this happened. I've never been in an altercation since with anyone.
Do you think you needed to go to jail? Do you think a GBH conviction, the experience of going to court, the experience of having your parents sitting in the public gallery with that look on their face and maybe a relationship break or whatever, do you think it needed jail?
I guess in hindsight, yes.
Okay.
Because it did stop me and my friends from doing what we were doing.
Yeah.
And, I guess I did need that. Not that I was...
Can you remember the first morning you woke up?
Yeah, I remember it. I remember it like yesterday.
Tell me about
first morning.
Tell me about it.
In prison or when the night I got...
well, actually, both I was thinking of, but prison in particular.
The first night in prison was scary. I remember walking in and it was that stereotypical, oh, look, there's fresh meat coming in comment.
Yikes.
And I was only 20, I was 19 at the time, never been in trouble before, not even had a run-in with the police. So, yeah, and then the next morning they basically say you're going on to the wing, as they call it, where all the other people are, with all the experienced prisoners, I guess you could say. Yeah, and then, I mean, I just can't. I think Sorry, Jane, I'm a bit nervous.
Take your time. Take all the time you want, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to you every day, and actually speaking to you is a bit scary.
I don't love that. You're a guys. Yeah.
You do my partner's head in. Sorry,
They'll learn. They'll learn.
Yeah, so the first day was awful. I mean, you're banged up for 23 hours a day, of the day that is, with a complete stranger.
So
as a 19-year-old,
what? Yeah, I can feel the fear. I really can, and the confusion. And so, what was it that worked? Do you think? Was it prison's just so rubbish? There's no way I'm going to run the risk of going back, or was it such a shock to your system that you changed course?
Prisons are rubbish. I mean, they were overcrowded. This is going
worse
back
now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's even worse than what it was. I mean, at one point there was 3 of us in a holding cell. I don't think that was meant to be the amount.
It wasn't built for that.
No, not at all. And the facilities obviously were very run down, but I guess that's what they have to be, because they're trying to teach you a lesson, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, every prisoner's going to be different, aren't they? But you would never. But from the sounds of it, you were never really at risk of being a reoffender. You learnt your short, sharp shock. Learnt your lesson. There's no way I'm going back there. If you were coming in and out of prison regularly, then it wouldn't be working, would it? The poor conditions or whatever it would be wouldn't be working.
I mean,
6 weeks. It's not a lot, is it? But it was enough.
Exactly, and the frustrating thing with it was, after the month and a half, I came out on the electronic tag.
Oh, yeah.
And so I somehow still had my job after going. I know, I was very fortunate. And I would start work very early in the morning, and I would always ring whoever the person was on the other end of the phone and say, look, I'm going to work within the time limits they gave me. But one morning I must have left literally 2 minutes early to go to work, and every day I'd ring them and say, look, I'm leaving, going to work, can you please record it? And I was like, yeah, no problem. The very next morning, 3 police cars out the front, I was back to prison for another month.
Oh, really?
And
for breach of your licence?
Yeah. And I was like, but I'm not, I rung up, I thought I was doing the correct thing in telling you. But no, I went back to prison so in total it was 2.5 months.
Got you. Okay. Well, I suppose rules are rules. Would be their defence. But you gave up fighting at this. Well, did you give up drinking to oblivion as well, or did you to
the point of being
where you would you would just wade into a fight, and that was enough to put you off. I guess that is it, isn't it? So under this legislation, you would not be jailed, and therefore you would get into another fight next weekend, and it could end much, much more horribly than the one that you actually got jailed for. Luke, thank you, mate. Give my love to your partner. It's 27 minutes after 12. Catherine's in Kendal. Catherine, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello, Catherine.
It's really interesting listening to your lad just now. Maybe it depends on the sentence. I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I'm a retired teacher and a 73-year-old grandmother. And I have been in prison 3 times now for climate protest. A week, twice on remand, 1 week. This is all within the last just over a year, I think. The first time was September last year. I was in remand for a week. And then last November, I was on remand for 6.5 weeks. And I could have been there for 6 months, but my sentencing for that, or my trial, I should say, not my sentencing, my trial is not actually now until 2025.
It's put back, and so they let you out?
Yeah, well, they can't keep you for more than 6 months.
Is that the rule on remand?
And also...
so I wasn't exaggerating when I said that if the criminal justice system was operating efficiently, then the current problems with overcrowding would be off the charts.
Yes. I mean, I was denied on the 6-week time. I was denied bail. There were a number of us, about 50 of us, were actually put on. No, not 50. The 50 of us did about the action, and about 25 of us were put on remand. Which I mean, it's such a waste of space.
Well, except that you presumably the court or the authorities decided that if they didn't lock you up, you'd go out and do another protest.
Very likely, yes. And in fact, the 2 weeks I did back in April was after a sentencing where I told the judge that I couldn't not go out and protest. He wanted us to say that we weren't going to protest again. And I can't do that. That would be a lie, because with the climate crisis as it is, I'm much more scared of the consequences for my grandchildren. I mean, I know you're very conversant with this, as should all of us be. I'm much more scared of that than I am actually of a prison sentence. But it was very interesting in prison because there were so many women there who should not have been there. They were on short-term, a lot of the time quite short-term, quite a lot of them, I think, rather... what's the name of the young man you had on before me? Anyway, he was saying he was recalled.
Luke. It was Luke in Letchworth.
Yeah, yes. As Luke was saying, again, this electronic tag. I know friends who have been on electronic tags and they failed. One woman was arrested for being in her garden because it was showing on her tag that she wasn't in her house.
It's like GPS, isn't it? And we've all got GPS things. I try and keep track of my children using GPS, and sometimes you haven't got a clue. It gives you a very, very rough idea of where they are. It's not specific enough to be confident enough to lock someone back. So you're a grizzled old con, really, Catherine.
Well, yes, you could say that. But as I say, I mean, it doesn't put it.
But this, you're a particular case as well, because this is a cause. Your cause is your belief in your cause is so strong.
I don't like the word cause and beliefs because we're in a climate crisis. It's
no,
not a cause.
Okay, your fear about science is such that it dwarfs any fear of a prison. How do your family feel about your frequent incarcerations, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I live in a little annex at my daughter's. They're very supportive. I've got my two grandchildren, 11 and 7. Yeah, they are. I mean, because they understand.
And do they come and visit Grandma in jail?
Well, again, as Luke was saying, yes. I live in Kendal. I was down South London.
Oh.
Because they will send you to a prison nearest to the court where you are sentenced. So, there are prisons up this way, but that would be, that they will take you to the nearest one. So, no, I was way down south. And
well, I never... And I mean, so not coming to trial until 2025, I sense there's a chart. I don't know what you're allowed and not allowed to say to me on the radio. Don't get me into trouble. I'm not as comfortable as you are going to jail. My kids need shoes. What, I sense that you might reoffend, Catherine.
There's always a possibility, yes. There's always a possibility. I might let a few of these go. But, all we need is the government to do what it should be doing, and we would not be out there. This is a ridiculous thing, isn't it?
Yes,
I mean, it's so scary. It's so scary. And the fact now, I mean, 350 people outside in London today protesting, including Greta.
Yes.
And
some of them are probably going to get locked up as well. I don't know. We'll catch up with Henry Riley perhaps about what's been going on down there. Catherine, thank you. I was not expecting a call from a 73-year-old retired teacher who has done Bird, but I'm so glad you were listening today. Thank you. And there it is. I mean, the question of whether those sentences are going to have any impact whatsoever upon Catherine's likelihood to reoffend has answered itself. 12:33. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:37. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A little bit of mea culpa from me. James, regarding your guy with the beer bottle, quotes, nothing much happened to him, just a few cuts, end quotes. The ignorance of how he may have impacted the other person forever. I bet they remember it. As a trauma worker, that guy could do with some awareness training, but what a laugh you had together. What about the fear? Geez. That's an excellent point, and I apologise. I shouldn't have... let that pass from Luke. I should have imagined what it would be like to be on the receiving end of a smack in the head with a beer bottle and what it might do to your confidence and your mental health. So thank you for pulling me up on that, and I will do better. Catherine, however, has come in for almost universal praise. even from people who don't consider themselves to be particularly concerned about climate change. And of course, the other side of that would be what a waste of prison space. An interesting message from a magistrate. As a magistrate, this is our hat from Liz. Our hands are tied. A young person who loves driving is in court after stealing a car. It's a 20th offence. All previous fines, which he can't afford to pay, haven't been paid. Community orders haven't worked. We've taken all previous offences into account, and we have to jail them for a short period of time. They then come out and do it all again, leading to more crime and more fines, more criminality. We shouldn't reward crime, but if I had the power to do so, I'd put in a community order which involves something to do with cars and see if we could turn their interest into legal pursuits. And I'm surprised to hear such black and white thinking from you. If Luke hadn't been sent to prison, he could have had community duties, probation liaison, help reducing his alcohol intake. It's not a binary choice. It's not prison or nothing. That's a very good point as well, which needed to be made. Siobhan is in Gravesend. Siobhan, what would you like to say?
Hi, thanks for having me on again.
You're very welcome.
I'm actually really nervous, whereas the first time, ironically, I wasn't. But it's an emotive subject. It's actually it's not about me. It's my husband.
Okay.
So I met him in 2000, and previous to that, he'd been on remand for a violent offence.
Okay.
It's quite horrible, actually, and it was absolutely related to his alcoholism.
Right.
And I was in quite a vulnerable situation when I met him.
Yes.
Anyway, he ended up receiving a prison sentence in 2001 for drink driving.
Right.
And it was his third offence. And it was acknowledged by the court that he did have a problem with alcohol, even though he was in his mid-20s.
Right.
So he did 2 months at Elmley Prison on the Isle of Sheppey, place I'd never want to visit again.
I'm sure.
And there were no steps taken to address the alcoholism, even after there's a period of probation afterwards. The weekly see a probation officer, and that was never addressed.
Yeah.
So fast forward almost exactly 20 years, we did separate in 2008. Although we never divorced because the domestic violence would have put me at a huge risk to have divorced him. In 2021, unfortunately, he had been. God, don't want to be graphic, but he had been dead in his flat for a week over Christmas.
Oh, Siobhan.
From alcoholism, because he just spiralled after that. And it's interesting the point you made from the text earlier. It's either a sentence or some sort of community order that not necessarily relative to the problems that you're experiencing.
But it would be how it'd get treated in a tabloid by some sort of idiotic columnist about soft touch being done for drink driving, and they're sending him on a course, but it would just have helped.
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't have had a worse consequence, could it, than doing nothing?
No, actually, I used to manage a children's home, and one of our children there has recently been convicted of murder. He did serve a short sentence for it sounds silly, but repeated silly offences.
Yes.
And the judge in the end got really annoyed, and he went to prison for a couple of months.
Right.
Anyway, in 2021, actually, he murdered a 15-year-old boy outside Woolwich Station. And if you knew this young boy's past, I cannot tell you what the access to these children's files looks like. It's harrowing what they've been through.
And there's no interest whatsoever in that, is there? In trauma? Because is it trauma-induced prison? Is that what it's called? You might know more about it than I do.
Yeah.
I've been reading about
my husband. Was a childhood of
trauma.
I did try to ring up actually about adverse childhood experiences, because I have also been through that, but fortunately took a different path, and I don't think that makes me a better person. It's just
no.
It's just life is a game of chances, and I think that, you know, if other opportunities happen, if I hadn't got pregnant before in my gap year and things like that.
If ifs and buts were pots and pans, Siobhan, there'd be no need of tinkers. As somebody once said.
But I'd like to see what we call in care, you know, some person-centeredness when people are being sentenced, you know.
Yeah, and there it is, you know, short prison sentences, even long prison sentences in some cases, having no real impact whatsoever on either recidivism or rehabilitation. So to what purpose? In the case of violent crime, of course, you need some form of restorative justice alongside the victim, the punishment that society imposes to ensure that kind of behaviour is a deterrent. People are deterred from it, but so much of the rest of it, Siobhan, you touch on. It's called trauma-informed prison. I knew that I'd been reading about it. The Centre for Crime and Justice Studies have done some research into it, and that is a sort of institutional violence as the systemic reproduction of oppressive policy and practice. And it's interesting, Siobhan mentions a children's home, because housing children in unregulated accommodation or releasing people from prison with no fixed abode can all contribute to this. And the idea that you can actually reduce prison spaces by understanding trauma better, it would be fairly straightforward if it wasn't for tabloid editing idiots. Thank you, Siobhan. I don't know, is the word tinkers politically incorrect? If it is, I wholeheartedly apologise for deploying it. It is now 1:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12 minutes to 1. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Rory Stewart's very good on this. Every time I mention Rory Stewart, I get accused of canonising him or beatifying him, and people send me his voting record from his time in David Cameron's government. So save yourself the effort of doing that. I am aware that he failed to defy the whips on countless occasions when he went through the lobby in support of pretty grim legislation. But it doesn't mean that his thoughts on prisons as a former minister in that field are worthless or indeed in any way diminished by his performance in other areas. And he's fascinating on this. Carmen's read the book, Rory Stewart's latest book, and talks about horrifying discovery that the majority of prisoners were serving sentences of around a week. The Netherlands offers up an interesting model, and they have some of the smallest prison populations in Europe. Sentences allow people to keep a semblance of normal life while doing time. That lessens the burden on the state to provide housing and jobs for ex-cons, because without those things, housing and jobs, they become immediately more likely to reoffend, says Carmen in Surrey. And I wasn't expressing any sympathy for the drink driver, Jenny. I was expressing sympathy for his widow, for Siobhan. And of course, if he had received proper help and rehabilitation with his alcohol on his first prison sentence, then there would have been a much better chance of him not reoffending. And if, God forbid, he had killed someone while drink driving, the only way you could have prevented that from happening would have been by giving him help with his alcohol abuse. So I think you possibly got the wrong end of my stick on that one. 12:49 is the time. Jake is in Crawley. Jake, what would you like to say?
I got sent to prison. I did about 4 months.
Right.
And then 3 months on a tag. And mine was for desertion from British Army. Crikey. Which I felt was pretty pointless when I went, because, I mean, all it were really were deterrent to other people. It didn't really teach me anything other than, but I learned nothing from it. There was no point to me.
Where were you when you deserted?
Oh no, I didn't end up going. So I didn't actually turn up for my flight. So I didn't actually go to Afghanistan and then run off in Afghanistan.
So you were being deployed to Afghanistan and you went AWOL before the tour started?
Yeah. I wanted to stay with my missus, sort of thing, at the time. So I saw that didn't go. I ended up not going. I made a decision not to go. I was AWOL for about 3 months, and then I got caught, sent back to army. I basically, there was no way they were getting me to go anyway at that stage because I'd already lost my head. I basically said to them, look, as soon as you give me a rifle, I'm going to make ready and my foot's coming off, so I'm not going. So, it's not happening.
Okay.
But obviously that were a case of them saying, well, fair enough, you'll go to prison. So I went to prison. I got sent to Chelmsford. Well, I went to Colchester for 5 days while they got me out. I had to go to a court first. I had to wait a few months first. I think it was about 2 months waiting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe about 4 weeks actually waiting.
How long had you been in the army before you went AWOL?
Only 18. I did about 18 months.
Right.
I started off in Hounslow, then I went over to Belfast, I was based in Belfast for a little bit, and then I went AWOL. I met AWOL loads of times, though, to be fair. But the last time I did it was I didn't want to be in. I didn't want to be in.
And you're not allowed to just leave like you can a normal job.
Oh no, you can't just. You can't. You're not allowed. Like 3 months into my training, they said to us all before we went on leave, you need to make your mind up today. Stuff in the army. If you don't make your mind up today, you've got 4 years. You're not getting out, sort of thing. So they did let me know, and I was like, hold on a minute. I said, I've not been home for 3 months. I want to go home first. I've got an holiday to Faliraki booked. I want to go and have fun with my friends and then come back and make my decision while I'm at home.
Right.
Don't wait like that. You've got to make your mind up now. And I didn't know. So at the time I was thinking, but if I'd have stopped in, I have to wait 6 days for a DOR, which meant I'd have missed my holiday to Faliraki. I weren't 100% sure if I wanted to stay or not anyway.
Right.
So I just said, well, I just stopped in. That was it. I wanted to go on holiday, so I went on holiday, come back, and I didn't go back to army. And then
they locked you up.
Me to go back.
Yeah. So what was prison like? I mean, so for you, it's a deterrent against other people who are thinking of going AWOL. It's not because you're not going to reoffend. You're not going to reoffend as a deserter. Do they? They don't take you back in. I mean, crikey, that's just.
That's what I mean. There were no learning curve for me because
well, of course
I weren't. It were perfect in a way because I weren't getting out of the army. But doing the sentence was deterrent to everybody else. It couldn't have possibly taught me a lesson because I couldn't reoffend again because I weren't in the army anymore. So in my world, I was thinking, well, this is pointless. I'm not going to reoffend. Like I would reoffend if you let me back, if you kept me in, but you're not even keeping me in. So
what was the purpose of your prison sentence? It's quite bizarre, isn't it?
It's a deterrent to everybody else.
No, I know that. I'm saying the question rhetorically. From your point of view, it was utterly pointless.
From my point of view, there was nothing. I couldn't learn anything.
No.
In a way, it was perfect, but it actually caused me a lot of drama. But it were perfect from the aspect of leaving the army.
Right.
But obviously, it weren't good, but you know what I mean.
How are you getting on now?
Pointless.
How are you getting on now?
I'm fine now.
Good.
Well,
relatively speaking.
Most of the time, anyway.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear it.
But yeah, I think it was pointless. Like I said, I don't think they should do that.
Did you go on the road? Did you hide when you were AWOL? Were you like?
Yeah. You can't work. I couldn't work free. Well, we're working for cash in hand outside.
Right.
But you can't get a proper job or like that because they get you straight away.
And they're looking for you properly. Is it the red caps that come after you when you're? Is that what they're called? The military police?
To be fair, mate, when they got me, I don't even know how they got me, but they surrounded the house. They were military police. They were police. There were no escape when they got me.
That's a lot of effort.
Get away. They were about 12. I think they were about. I can't remember how many, but I bet there were at least 9, 10 of them.
Good Lord! And well. That's a very odd. I mean, all the calls we've taken.
And then
today.
They had to unarrest me. I could have got away again, but I thought I'll just go and face it. When they got me to airport, they had to unarrest me because they weren't allowed to take a prisoner on. It was a normal civilian plane,
right?
So they had to unarrest me. Which when they unarrested me, they took my cuffs off me. I could have gone then.
Well, you could have just legged it.
I could have just gone, because I wasn't in any cuffs. They weren't allowed.
You'd be spending the rest of your life on the. You'd be spending the rest of your life on the run.
Which I did.
But you couldn't spend the rest of your life on the run. You'd have to join the A-team or something.
That's what I mean. That's why I did it. I thought I'll just get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way. Well, I never. That's a story, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a mad one. Yeah.
It is a mad one. Well, I'm glad you're doing better now, mate. I really am, and I'm sorry for what you went through. Every call's been a bit. I don't know if I was expecting a sort of trend in the but every single call has been a little bit of a gobsmacker, frankly, today. From 73-year-old grandmother doing regular prison sentences to Jake sounding like something out of almost of a sort of TV drama or something. I wish you well, mate. I wish you well. 12:55 is the time. Robert's in Greenwich. Robert, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Long-time listener. I thought I'd had my bit after listening to Luke earlier, actually.
Yeah.
I in the same position. I was quite young. And I was in drink. I had a couple of drinks, and we were out with friends. And a friend of mine was being assaulted.
Right.
Actually, the guy come over who's older than us.
Yeah.
I was 19 or 20. He was late 30s, I think. Quite a big chap, but then I was quite big.
Yeah.
And he was hitting a friend of mine, and he was dragging him across the road. I ran over and hit him once,
right,
to kind of put him, to get him to stop doing what he was doing. And yeah, he ended up going to Crown Court. And to be honest with you, I wasn't one of these people who I didn't believe should have gone to prison. Obviously, a lot of people say that.
Yeah.
But going to young offenders actually opened my eyes, and I think it was a make of me. I mean, at the time I was
fair enough.
Business. I was a young guy running a business from a dad, and I was doing quite well. I've got a young family now.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the young offenders, I think the prison system, because the people you see in there...
How long were you sentenced for?
I got 6 months, ended up doing 3. But they sent me, like Luke,
Yeah.
up to Ipswich.
All over the shop.
All over the shop, yeah. Eventually, I ended up in a place called Holiday Bay, which is young offenders.
Right.
But what I saw there and what they did in the system there was, to me, a lot better. And I've come out of there knowing full well, I mean, I'm in my 50s now.
Right.
There was no way I was ever going to reoffend. They gave me discipline. I mean, my family background, my grandfather was in the Navy, so quite a disciplined background from that side of the family.
But were you running wild? I mean, it doesn't sound as if you were running very wild before you went in.
I wasn't. I was a typical 19-year-old who was out with his friends drinking. And if you see a situation and your friend's in trouble, unfortunately, and more so when you've had a couple of drinks,
you're going to wade in.
You tend to wade in. And I was 6'6" and 18 stone.
Oh.
But I was a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
This guy was, late 30s, early 40s.
No, it doesn't sound as if you deserve to be sent down to me. But you, in a sense, and I'm going to run out of time, but you're glad you were, I think.
I'm glad I was. I lost faith in the system because of what happened to me. But going into young offenders, marching, working the way they work you
liked
the
it.
Discipline. Not so much like
you should have swapped with the last fella, shouldn't you? You should have gone in the army, and he should have been running a business with your dad, and then neither of you would ever have gone to jail.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Robert. I'm grateful for that. It was a really interesting... God, what a bunch of stories that was. In fact, I love it when you end the programme and the last text that came into the studio says, please do this subject again, James. We'll put it on the list, shall we? We'll put it on the list. That is it from me for another day. If you have missed any of today's show, then you can, of course, listen back to the whole show podcast on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. You'll also find all of LBC shows to catch up on and all the latest news from LBC. It's brilliant, by the way, the ability to pause and rewind live radio on Global Player. It means you're always in control. And it's free from your app store or globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick with you at 4. Sheila Fogarty with you now.
Thank you very much, James.
James O'Brien on LBC.